So listen, I know some of you are railroad purists. You like your locomotives black. You like your diesels dirty. You know where every rivet is supposed to be and whether or not that model of that locomotive had that component in that place and the specific shade of color it was delivered in for that railroad in that year. Maybe you model a specific era. Maybe you model a specific road name. Maybe you model a specific geography. For all of you who fall into those categories, I'm going to need you to sit down for this one because the custom runs are taking over. Let's talk about it. This certainly turned into an interesting spring in O-Gauge, didn't it? Normally, this is a quiet period. The first catalogs of the year are out and pre-orders are closed, and the second catalog of the year is a few weeks away. Spring York is done, and people move on to summertime hobbies. In any other year, April through June in this hobby is about as quiet as it gets. Of course, this year, two events have driven everyone into a frenzy we haven't seen in a long time. Between the United States semi-quincentennial celebration and the historic run of the Union Pacific Big Boy number 4014 across the Mississippi and into Philadelphia for the 4th of July, every part of the hobby has felt the impact. Whether you are a Union Pacific fan or not, and no matter which era you model, the fact that the 4014 is coming to the East Coast for the first time since it was manufactured has captured everyone's imagination. And it's not just the Big Boy. From lots of America 250 paint schemes on locomotives and rolling stock, to iconic, historic repaints for the Norfolk and Western J-Class 611, Reading and Northern 2102, and the Southern 4501, it's hard to remember a time in the last 20 years where it feels like there is more news and talk about trains everywhere. And of course, if it's in the news, or people are talking about it, companies are going to want to sell it. O-Gauge trains are no exception. Every major catalog released so far this year, including Third Rail, Atlas, and Lionel, have been rich with options if you're looking to add some red, white, and blue to your fleet. Lionel in particular has gone pretty hard. They started releasing America 250 products all the way back at the beginning of 2025 in their Big Book catalog. They dedicated 6 full pages of the July catalog to new products specifically celebrating this semi-quincentennial, and then followed that up with a few more pieces in the September and October catalogs. The real avalanche started in the 2026 Big Book, though, where we got a whopping 20 pages and 57 different individual SKUs for sale. From a completely re-released and enhanced American Freedom train, complete with Southern Pacific number 4449 in its glorious AFT paint scheme, to custom rolling stock, hand cars, locomotives, and sets, Lionel seemingly left no stone unturned. Third Rail followed suit in a more subdued but elegant fashion, with a new model of the GS4 and its American Freedom train livery. They're also offering an Amtrak patched version that will be a first in O-scale, which is very cool. To round out the year, our Yellow Box friends hit the patriotic jackpot, not only sponsoring the Fantasy American Freedom Train wrap on the Norfolk and Western 611, but announcing in June that it would be available as an O-scale all-brass model, along with the Greenbrier boxcars and the set of Norfolk Southern SD70 ACE American 250 units that are accompanying the Big Boy cross-country. Atlas offered 8 different pieces, a combination of locomotives and rolling stock, including the incredible Norfolk & Western 6-bay hoppers that I'm excited to pick up. You know, in 2028 when they finally arrive. MTH isn't a company that does catalogs anymore, but they announced a new Rail King SD9 back in July of last year. But other than a caboose in November of 2025, they hadn't announced anything else until March of this year. For those of us who love the bicentennial and semi-quincentennial pieces, this has been a magnificent time, especially if you're a fan of Lionel. Part of the reason I give kudos to Lionel here specifically is because I'm a little disappointed to see how much of the holiday-themed gear that's built around a specific year is actually going to be delivered in that year. Lionel will have the 60-foot light-up flag boxcars, the America 250 caboose, the SD38, the AFT pieces, and more in buyers' hands before the year is out, and it's nice to see them flex their manufacturing capabilities when they want to. Like I mentioned earlier though, America's anniversary also brought us something else historic. The largest operating steam locomotive on the planet, crossing the country and coming back to the East Coast for the first time since it rolled off the assembly line. The UP Big Boy Coast to Coast Tour hits cities across the country and ends up culminating with an appearance in Philadelphia on the 4th of July. While the 4014 has always been a source of admiration by train fans and modelers alike, it's fair to say that the visibility and excitement that has been brought about by the Coast to Coast Tour has reached every corner of the country. A quick look on YouTube for videos from people who have found a way to get to see the Big Boy on this trip, either watching it race past or getting to see it at a whistle stop, and it's amazing to realize how much this locomotive is currently in the public zeitgeist. It's been the lead story on news broadcasts in parts of the country, which is just crazy.
Rail fans packed Steamtown National Historic Site today for the arrival of Union Pacific Big Boy number 4014, the world's largest operating steam locomotive. Good evening, I'm Aaron Leedy.
And I'm Raylan Lee. The cross-country tour is part of the celebration leading up to America's 250th birthday, and local officials say more than 20,000 people turned out for the first day of public viewing. Fox 56's Hannah Poggi takes us there.
If you haven't made plans to see it yet, I can't recommend strongly enough that you try to. The crowds keep getting larger and larger. In addition to being a piece of American history and an absolute engineering marvel, this may be the only time that those of us on the East Coast will ever get to see it running on trackage that used to belong to some of the most iconic railroads in America. I drove up to Steamtown National Historical Site to see 4014 reunited with 4012 for the first time since the early 40s, and I can't describe how awesome it was. The site averages 60,000 visitors a year, which works out to around 164 visitors on a normal day. There were 28,500 visitors on June 15th alone. The Rangers are expecting to have up to 100,000 visitors in just the 2 weeks that 4014 is on site. Can you even imagine that many people? The National Park Service, Union Pacific, and Norfolk Southern all worked hard to make it a couple days to remember, and they knocked it out of the park. From free water to additional queuing to keep people from stampeding, to the way Union Pacific broke up the train and spread it around the site so everybody could see, I was really impressed. We had a bunch of community members make the trip, but the crowds were so crazy that it was hard to make plans to meet up. Shout out to Jim Gam, Captain Andy, Ron Urban, Mike with the Kisco Falls Railroad, Grande Trains, and everybody else I'm probably forgetting. It was a pretty incredible time. Of course, with this kind of popularity and visibility, you knew that the model train companies were going to capitalize it on every single way possible. What I don't think any of us realized was the extent to which that was going to happen. Just to get the crazy part of this story out of the way up front, there are, as of this moment, 44 different versions of the Union Pacific Big Boy that are currently cataloged or available as custom runs in 3-rail alone from 2 different manufacturers and 9 different dealers or hobby associations. And we've even seen distributors in the mix. Just for kicks, MTH threw in 4 different G-gauge models as well. There has never been this type of multi-vendor, multi-scale offering of any locomotive that I can ever remember, and certainly not one offered in so many custom designs. Lionel kicked things off in January with their 2026 version 1 catalog, which included a run of LionMaster Big Boys, including the first ever Polar Express themed version in any scale. MTH then announced a run of the Premier Line Scale Big Boy in March, including our first look at an updated 2026 excursion design on the 4014. Over the next 3 weeks, MTH would release 5 Rail King versions and 4 versions of the Big Boy in G scale. In addition to the excursion design, MTH also included Denver and Rio Grande UP Heritage paint schemes, the 49er Hot Dog paint scheme, multiple Army paint schemes, the George Bush 4141 funeral train design, a couple fantastical 250th anniversary designs, and finally, the absolute most hideous Trump design that I've ever seen put on a model train, even by MTH, and that's saying something. Of course, over in Discord, we decided that if MTH can use terrible AI, so can we. All told, MTH delivered 15 versions of the Big Boy, 5 Premier, 6 Rail King, and 4 G scale. That alone would have made this a notable inflection point for fantasy paint schemes. However, not to be outdone, Lionel released a rare out-of-cycle catalog dedicated just to their 3rd run of the Vision Line Big Boy, one that they promise to have in customers' hands before the end of the year. Overall, this is the 5th run of Scale Big Boys to go with at least 3 semi-scale runs, selling models in 14 different prototypical road numbers and too many fantasy numbers to count. In this catalog alone, Lionel delivered 10 different models of the Big Boy, one of which was, of course, the prototypical update to the excursion design of the 4014 to commemorate its cross-country journey. An interesting aside here, there's a great community story surrounding the new Eagle Herald that the locomotive has on the front. When Union Pacific released the first pictures of it, one of my friends, Will, had a coworker who resin printed a bunch of different sized versions and painted them by hand before the Rocky Mountain Train Show. While at the show, the Lionel folks came over to Will's club layout where they were running a version of the Lionel 4014 with the newly added Herald. Lionel loved it, took a couple samples with them for research, and that was the last I heard about it. Imagine my surprise when I see the cover of the Lionel Big Boy catalog, and it's one of the pieces they picked up at the show. Kudos to Will and crew for the creativity to put that together and paint it to match, and to Lionel for being engaged with their community and being willing to make changes to a model to make sure it's as right as it can be. I can't wait to see the real thing. In addition to the tour version, they released 9 more paint schemes, with only 2 of them, a version of the 4014 as it looked with the removable smoke lifters, and a version of the coal-fired 4004, having any relationship to the prototype. Lionel introduced a Big Boy in the American Freedom Train colors. They released the 49ers Hot Dog scheme, which has proven to be incredibly popular with collectors for some reason. They released a Lionel Lines version with flag-covered smoke lifters, a pilot version that's unpainted and undecorated, 2 holiday versions, one Christmas design, and the first ever Vision Line Polar Express Big Boy, and finally, a Lionel Store exclusive version to go with the annual set of limited edition runs Lionel has been doing since 2020. That one proved to be so popular that they sold out of the initial run of 50 within hours, and had to come back later and announce that they would be expanding the run, ultimately selling a total of 91 pieces before they shut it down again. That would make it the biggest one of those releases ever, while also being the most expensive. While the update of 4014 to the 2026 excursion design was notable, and both Lionel and MTH gave a token nod towards collectors of prototypical models, with each manufacturer producing 2 other versions of the Big Boy that actually existed, the real story here is the fantasy schemes and then the custom runs. While custom runs have been an important part of the hobby for a while, and we'll talk about that in a second, I have a theory as to why this particular locomotive, at this particular time, seems to have blown the lid off of the interest in and demand for custom paint schemes. If we look at the steam locomotives that remain in operation across the United States, there are plenty that are unique and that may be in a configuration that was only run by a single railroad. Many of them are the only surviving members of a class of locomotives, but very few of them are singular. The Class J, the GS, the UPFEF, and the S3 are all Northerns. There are plenty of Shays still running. We have at least a few Climaxes, Mikados, Pacifics, Prairies, Americans, Berkshires, Decapods, Mastodons, and Consolidations. There's only one H6, but that was originally a USRA design, so there was no lack of 2662s run by different railroads. Many designs, like the Mogul, were even exported to other countries for use on their rails. But the Big Boy is different. They were only ever made for and run by Union Pacific. Other than some very rare, minor cosmetic changes, they were only ever run in black paint with a graphite smoke box. That there's only one functional example left doesn't make it special as much as the fact that it was essentially a myth if you lived east of the Mississippi. If you want to see a Mikado or a Pacific or a Northern, no matter where you are in the country, chances are there's one within driving distance. If you want to see a 4884 articulated under steam, there's only one, and it's probably not near where you live. Maybe it's just me, but as an East Coast train fan, the Big Boy had become the Bigfoot of trains. We all assume it existed, but none of us had ever seen it. Even getting to see one of the remaining static displays for some reason feels more like an event than going to see even a famed locomotive like the AFT T1 in Baltimore or 4449 in Portland. So you have a locomotive that is an absolute blank slate creatively, that is still operational, and that has not been seen by a tremendous number of people just because of the geography of where it sits and where it can run, and that was only ever used by a single railroad in a single paint scheme. It's very literally a unicorn. Against that backdrop, we had the popularity of custom runs in general. Add to that the inclusion of fantasy paint schemes by both Lionel and MTH in their respective catalogs, and it just set off a firestorm. Everyone who had ever wanted to see what the Big Boy would look like in their favorite locomotive's paint scheme felt like they had permission to do it. Just to give you a sense of how big and popular this became, over in the O-Gauge Evolution Discord server, I spent almost 3 full days just taking requests and delivering designs for users. In the end, I created more than 90 of them myself, and I wasn't the only one building them. We did so many that Zach got annoyed with how they had taken over the usual discussion channels and pushed us into a place just for custom run talk. When you include everyone else who was also mocking up designs, there had to have been more than 120 of them generated just in the first 2 weeks after the Lionel Big Boy catalog came out. Some of them were good. Many of them were bad. A few of them were absolute abominations, but I've never seen so many fantasy designs on a single locomotive in my entire 40 years in this hobby. Also helping was the availability of tools to be able to make high-quality renderings of the locomotive in whatever paint scheme you could imagine, quickly and cheaply. I don't want to debate how we all feel about using AI, but suffice it to say the quality and usability have never been better, and it showed. Some of these designs are amazing, and you can tell that someone talented put time and effort into making them that way. What I will say is that regardless of the tool that you're using, the expectation is that you respect your audience enough to spend the appropriate amount of time and energy to deliver something of high quality. It's one thing for people who are goofing around a Discord to send slop memes back and forth, but it's another thing for a dealer who's expecting people to pay thousands of dollars for a model to deliver renderings that clearly had no time or effort put into them. I'm judging those folks, and so should you. Like any tool, a whole lot of it depends on the person using it. I'm so impressed with all of the extraordinarily high-quality profile pictures that I see people using on Discord or people using on their YouTube channels. Same for the current sticker craze. Putting these designs together and tweaking them to the specific request of the folks who are using them is really something that takes time and skill to master. It's not magic. Some of the Big Boy designs were created by incredibly talented people. This one here was one of my absolute favorites. The amount of detail is mind-blowing, and I don't care what tool they used to create it, I'm impressed. Impressed enough that I used the overall concept to frame one of my favorite designs that I did, which unfortunately I couldn't get anyone to make for me. I'll definitely try again next catalog. I love NASA designs, and having something to commemorate Artemis would be really cool. Overall though, look at these numbers. Some thoughts about this list. First, most dealers listed here shouldn't surprise anyone. They're all the folks that we've come to expect where custom runs are involved, but it is nice to see the inclusion of Thomas for the first time. Hopefully this list keeps growing as dealers better understand the finances and build a network to support the necessary orders. I wish Lionel in particular did a better job helping these folks publicize and sell their custom runs, but maybe we'll just have to do that as a community ourselves. Second, the arrival of the distributors is interesting. For those of you who don't know, most dealers don't buy from a vendor directly. They go through a distributor who manages taking in product and then sending it out to the individual dealers. The distributors are usually anonymous. They're not household names, and you probably wouldn't recognize them. Commissioning a custom run and then offering a portion of that custom run to your best customers who are interested in being able to sell it is a new and interesting tactic. We'll have to see where that goes. Despite the Train World claims that this is an exclusive, it isn't, and having one custom run shared by multiple dealers is something we haven't seen before, and I'm very curious how the numbers play out when dealers are essentially competing with one another to sell the same locomotive. MTH continues to lead the way with the most garish designs regardless of your politics. Luckily though, we decided that if they can use AI, so can we. Hands down, the worst artwork though, and I need you all to understand how bad you have to be worse than that Trump abomination, was the MTH Katie Big Boy put out by Trainloft. I mean, wow. I think it's missing some wheels and maybe some running gear? Listen, I get that these are just mock-ups, but have a little pride in your work. Next time, come over to Joker's Discord server and I'll do it for you. And I promise, I'll only charge you a little bit over retail. Predictably, all of this brought up lots of reactions and feelings from people across the hobby. Some were offended at the paint schemes, and we heard more than once the Big Boy belongs to the Union Pacific. Some were offended by the use of AI, and there were lots of AI slop cries, even for the most meticulously rendered paint schemes. Some people were just offended. Offended at the price, offended at the variety, offended at all the things people find to get offended at. While that's not surprising considering some of these prototype-only rivet counter folks are just fine with 3-rail track, it was at times disappointing to see some of the reactions. Once again, I will tap the sign for everyone. What was new and very exciting, at least to me personally, was that the community-made designs got good enough and received enough of a positive reception that it appears to have actually inspired dealers to commission them as custom runs from both Lionel and MTH. While I'm never going to stand up and say that the work I put into all of these silly mock-ups actually turned into something real, what I will note is that almost every custom run made was included in that huge batch of designs that was thought up by the community in the first 3 or 4 days after the Lionel catalog drop. Some of the folks putting the custom runs together were open to listening to ideas or even soliciting designs of their own. I really think this could be an inflection point in how directly the community gets to be involved in setting the direction for custom runs that dealers make. Rather than waiting for a manufacturer to make a model in our favorite road name or paint scheme, why not just make it happen ourselves? I mean, we are the ones spending the money. But all of that leads to this bigger discussion. I think that custom runs are one of the few things that have been an unqualified win for every part of the hobby. In business, there's a concept known as the golden triangle. Typically, the triangle is labeled good, cheap, and fast, and the rule is you only get to pick two. You can never have all three. For the three-rail hobby, our triangle is the manufacturers, the dealers, and the customers. It's so rare that something happens that makes all three groups happy. If it makes the manufacturers and dealers happy, it usually does so at the expense of customers. If it makes the customers and dealers happy, the manufacturers probably don't like it. That's just how it's always been. In this case, custom runs are not just the best things that the manufacturers have ever found from a business standpoint, better than build to order, better than dealer networks, better than selling direct to consumers. I think it's also the one guaranteed way that dealers can differentiate themselves in a world where they are increasingly less important to the hobby as a whole. To explain what I mean, let's talk a little bit about train finances. Back in the olden days, the early 90s, Lionel made what Lionel wanted to make, and they put it in the catalog. Dealers would place orders and things would be shipped to the dealers. If there were things that didn't sell well, the dealers would end up dumping them at wholesale prices just because inventory sitting on the shelves was losing money. That hurt Lionel's ability to rerun different models because there might be a glut of low-priced versions out there that they didn't have any control over, which really hurt when they were not developing new tooling. Everyone ended up being the loser except the consumers, who knew that if they waited long enough, they were going to end up getting crazy deals on trains because the dealers simply couldn't afford to let them sit on shelves forever. So in came build to order in 2014. Lionel would put stuff in the catalog, and dealers would get pre-orders from their customers and would submit those pre-orders to Lionel, who would then decide how big a run to do to cover the pre-orders, and then still have some small amount of inventory left. If it didn't get enough orders, they didn't run it. Lionel loved it because they didn't make more than they knew they would sell, even if it probably hurt their margins a little bit because the runs themselves weren't as big, which brought the per unit cost up slightly. Dealers didn't like it because it required a level of trust and communication that was new for them. How do you get customers to place pre-orders? How do you contact them when their orders are in? Do you make them pay up front, or do you trust them to pay when the trains arrived? Because every dealer had access to everything that was built to order, the only real way they had to differentiate was on how much discount they gave off of the pre-order price. I recognize that customer service matters, but dealers also weren't service centers like they were in the 60s. So if all the repairs and maintenance were going back to Lionel anyway, and few local hobby shops were able to stock parts in any significant way, more and more customers started shopping around on price alone. The consumer wasn't a fan of build to order because it made the lead time between the catalog and getting the trains incredibly long, since nothing was manufactured until orders were counted. It kept the price of the trains generally higher, especially on the secondary market, simply because there wasn't as much inventory. Even if you could find one new in a local hobby shop, you were probably missing out on a sizable discount by not pre-ordering. Finally, for both the dealers and the customers, it cemented the internet as a viable and even preferable place to do business together. Mail order and retail walk-in business still existed, but this is when we start to see the possibility that dealers outside of the traditional hotbed regions for trains could grow and be prosperous. Nothing beats good business sense and work ethic, but I'm sure some of the dealers who are on the smaller side or in smaller markets have thrived in an environment like the one Lionel created with Build to Order. Does a juggernaut spring up in Atlanta, Indiana without it? Maybe, but I don't think so. The removal of regional boundaries is one of the many, many things that I wish the TCA had thought to take advantage of, but that's an entirely different discussion for an entirely different day. So that's been the state of the hobby primarily for Lionel, with Atlas and MTH following suit to some degree. Third Rail has always taken it one step further and put out offerings that they weren't going to promise a delivery date for until they got enough commitments from customers to justify making the run. Third Rail and the other brass importers more or less built the whole custom run model and have used it successfully as their primary model for decades. Today, we find ourselves in the era of the custom run. The reason that so many of the manufacturers are jumping on this bandwagon as quickly as they can is because it's one of the business models that removes all risk from them completely. The dealer designs the model. If the color's wrong, that's the dealer's fault. If that version of the GG1 custom run never existed with that road number, or with that color, or in that riveted version, that's not Lionel's fault. The dealer has a minimum order that they have to order so that they can get the custom run made. The dealer is responsible for doing all of the advertising and order collection and pays the manufacturer for the full run regardless of how many of them they've actually sold. From a manufacturer's standpoint, it's almost the perfect business model. There's a reason Third Rail has used it this entire time, and now all of them are finding out how nice it is to know every time you approve a manufacturing run exactly how much margin you're going to make on every single unit. You know, until idiotic tariffs pop up out of nowhere and mess everything up. It even lets the manufacturers reap the benefits of designs that could be problematic for them to embrace directly, like the current proliferation of Trump designs or the Jack Daniels design. If there's a market for the items, they make money. If there's exposure or blowback, that's all put on the dealer. Mr. Muffin had an issue last year or the year before where a run of Trump models was pre-ordered by a bunch of folks that helped justify the order, but then a whole bunch of them canceled before the models arrived. In that case, the dealer is the only one on the hook, and that can be rough. I'm a big fan of keeping your politics out of my train room, but hurting a dealer to make a point seems pretty childish. Despite all of that, the dealers don't hate it. In a world where we don't have local hobby shops anymore, and the bigger dealers and distributors are always going to provide better pre-order pricing, this is one of the few ways that dealers can differentiate themselves and earn business on their own merits. I have bought things from Mr. Muffin's Trains and METCA simply because they had the custom runs that I wanted, and I'm not talking about one or two. I probably have close to a dozen different Mr. Muffin custom runs alone, and probably half that number again from METCA, alongside TCA, LCCA, the Lionel store, and others. I certainly have way more custom runs from Steve than I have bought locomotives from him over the last 2 or 3 years. It is the core of my business with him. And they don't have to discount them as much as they would discount a regular Lionel pre-order, because they are the only game in town if you want that model. Some of the dealers take that to an obnoxious degree. The price that the Train Loft is charging for their custom runs is almost always at or above MSRP, whereas everyone else is usually trying to figure out what a reasonable discount is to give customers. Personally, there's no chance I ever pay over retail for anything new from a dealer, but maybe you really need a Norfolk and Western Maroon triplex or the Denver and Rio Grande Big Boy. If If that's your jam, the train loft will certainly take your money. It even helps the aftermarket, because with such small numbers of custom runs being produced, they rarely find their way into the aftermarket, and when they do, the prices on them tend to be pretty high. That's what happens when you only have to make 40 of them. One of the most expensive secondhand locomotives I've ever bought was the METCA Air Force One SD70 ACE with the matching caboose and 2 tank cars. The people who bought them love them, and there just aren't that many available. When one did finally come up for sale, I was happy to pay whatever the asking price was, knowing it might be years before I found another one. Ever since the reemergence of Lionel in the early 90s destroyed the value of the post-war train market, it's been common wisdom that 3-rail trains are not investments. Buying them and hoping that they are going to appreciate over time is a waste of investment capital. I don't think the custom runs have completely changed that position, but it has certainly made it so that the most popular of those custom runs are the pieces that are holding or even appreciating in value the most. A great example of this is the Locomotive of the Year runs that Lionel have been putting out since 2020. Each of those models have proven to be incredibly popular and are almost non-existent on the secondary market. Last week, I had someone reach out after seeing a video of my 2025 Vanderbilt Locomotive of the Year and tell me he was desperate to have one. He ended up paying almost twice the original MSRP because it was still cheaper than getting one of the 2 that are for sale on eBay. By the way, those are the only 2 Locomotives of the Year from any year up for sale right now. The majority of them are unobtainium, and at least one, the 2023 Flash Coat Dreyfus, I've never actually seen in person. The limited nature and incredible attractiveness to consumers makes it natural that those custom runs will be in high demand and retain their value. All that to say, if you're up in arms over the roughly 40 big boy versions that are for sale right now, you're gonna have to figure out how to come to grips with it, because this is not going away anytime soon. In fact, depending on how well the big boy custom runs do, I'm predicting that Lionel is going to drop the minimum run number from its current 40 to something closer to what MTH requires now. My guess is that you'll be able to do a custom run for as little as 25 Lionel locomotives at some point in the next couple years, or maybe the minimum actually goes up to 50, but you can split it across 2 designs. Why wouldn't they encourage more of the business model that's serving their bottom line so well? So what happens from here? I think the dealers, the smart dealers anyway, are going to embrace this and really take it to the next level. For better or for worse, Lionel doesn't participate at all in the marketing of these custom runs. Would it kill them to simply put the part numbers in the system on their website so that you can search for them? Apparently yes. MTH does a much better job of this, but it's still pretty passive, and much of the burden is on the dealers to update the website with what availability they have from a stock perspective. It's going to be on those dealers to align themselves with the community and influencers that have the ability to get those designs in front of people who are looking to spend money. We already see the success that stores like Legacy Station and Train World are having by working with high-profile collectors and influencers to build custom runs incorporating their branding, all of which sell out incredibly quickly. When was the last time you saw an Eric's Trains locomotive sitting on a shelf? How fast did Thomas and his Trains sell out their run of 40 Pensy Tuscan big boys? Do you think Train World is going to have leftover RBP models? I don't. The dealers who haven't figured that out are going to have to catch up. Business is great if you can sell them all, but if Lionel's not going to push them for you, and if MTH is going to make you do it yourself, you have to figure out how to get things moving. I think over the next couple of years, we're going to see much more structure around how brands and influencers interact when it comes to custom runs, whether those runs involve influencer branding or not. I don't think I'm ever going to be interested in putting a CCMF logo on a locomotive, but I do know that I'm in a position to be able to bring visibility and business to a dealer or manufacturer. We're going to see more dealers going on podcasts and live streams to talk about the custom runs that they're doing and soliciting feedback from the community directly. I don't know about all of you, but all of that sounds great. If I got to ask for something, it would be for the manufacturers to clearly define and stay in their lane when it comes to custom runs, and to really let those be ways for dealers to differentiate and shine. Lionel wants to do a Locomotive of the Year, a Polar Express, a Christmas version, and a Halloween version. Great. Do those consistently so that the dealers don't have to figure out which ones are being done or not done and fill the gaps, and then let the dealers have everything else. The dealers have done a pretty good job of keeping the drama to a minimum around which custom runs they're associated with, and that's good for both them and for the customers. If I want a Santa Fe black bonnet design, I know I'm going to Pat's Trains. If I want a Monon version, I know I'm going to Mr. Muffin. Air Force One, always Stu and METCA. There's definitely some overlap, like with the US Army theme designs, and not all of the dealers are interested in playing nicely for sure. It's beneficial to customers if we know what to expect and who to expect it from. If you'll indulge me, a quick rant here. My plea to the dealers: if you're going to do one of the fantasy paint schemes that already exists, especially one that one of the manufacturers started, and for example, this could be the blue and silver nickel plate design, the orange and silver the Chessie design, or the 49er hot dog version, or even the Katie, don't overthink it. Just give the most recent Lionel version to the designers and say, I want it to look like this. I was very excited about both the Chessie and NKP versions from Mr. Muffin and pre-ordered them both, but his Chessie design was nothing at all like the ones that have come from Lionel, and rumor has it that he's going to make the wheels on the NKP all blue. I've already canceled my Chessie order, and if the wheels on the NKP are anything other than the silver that they've been on every other NKP model, I'll cancel that one too. Stu over at METCA understood the assignment with the NKP 080 they released earlier this year. Don't think, just give us the design we know and love on a different locomotive. I feel better. It would also be great if the manufacturers did a better job of helping the dealers publicize those designs. There's no reason that Lionel or MTH couldn't put up a web page, especially for custom run designs, with a link to the dealer who's selling it. They want people to buy more, right? That feels like a pretty low-lift thing and would help both Lionel and the dealers a lot. Custom runs, AI slop, dealer differentiation, abominations, political bullshit, limited editions, locomotives of the year, influencer hype. These are all part of the game now. The manufacturers love it, the dealers can use it to their advantage if they want to, and we get to add really cool designs that are limited runs to our collection and know that they should maintain their value. Love it or hate it, the custom runs are here to stay. Personally, I'm a huge fan. I'd love to hear your thoughts about custom runs in general, or any specific custom runs you've found that really resonated with you positively or negatively. Join the conversation down in the comments, and let's continue the discussion over in Discord using the link in the description. Also, make sure you're clicking the bell and the subscribe button, please. Need a custom run designed? Reach out and let me know what you're looking for, and we'll see what we can do. Thank you all for watching, and hopefully we'll get to meet up at a Big Boy event before the summer is out. For those of you going to either the TCA convention or the LCCA convention in Denver, I'll be at both. If you see me at either one, please come over and say hi. I'd love to meet as many of you as I can. Be safe with the fireworks. We don't need anybody losing a finger. Look for a pretty huge announcement from me over the holiday weekend, and I'll see you all back here again soon.